Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 10 dazzling, fantastic, singular chamber works for beginners. You know, the world of chamber music can be very, very intimidating, particularly if you are trying to get into the standard chamber music formats, like specifically the string quartet or the piano sonata, because you've got tons and tons of repertoire, number one, and you have a reputation that it has for fearsomeness or difficulty or high culture things and people who yell and scream about minute details with extraordinary aggressiveness, and it can be daunting. I get it, I really do. And the fascinating thing about chamber music, which means just works for small groups, that's all it is. Some stuff made to be played basically in a chamber, in a room, at home, rather than a big concert hall. The fascinating thing about it is that there is all kinds of stuff outside these standard ensembles and formats that's just wonderful, and that might make a great way to get started with chamber music, because you can find something that really suits your vision of what this stuff should sound like, something that really strikes you, something that's so extraordinary and individual that you don't think about it with the same sort of attitude that you do chamber music. Chamber music, it's chamber music. No, you're not going to worry about that. You're going to just listen to it and love it, because it's just great music. Of course, all that other stuff is great music too. But the issue is, what's your entree? How do you find something that's going to get you started? And there is no answer, because it's going to be different for everybody. Some people feel very happy just jumping into things like the late Beethoven string quartets and things like that, where everyone's got opinions and whatnot. And others, may want to find something a little bit more off the beaten path. You can personalize your journey, perhaps. So anyway, I've put together a list of 10 really remarkable pieces, most of which sit outside the standard groupings, but not all of them. They just are there because they're wonderful and unique and different sounding. And so there you have it. And I have a wonderful musical example, which I'm going to start with. You ready? So get ready. We're not even going to talk about what it is yet. I'm going to just stick this thing up here so you can see what the disc is, and then we'll talk about the music. Listen to this. Just listen. Now, is that delightful or is that delightful? I mean, don't you want to hum it? Couldn't you play it over and over again? It's delicious. That is Francis Poulenc. He's Francis Poulenc, who lived from 1899 to 1963. That is his trio for piano, oboe, and bassoon. Now, piano, oboe, and bassoon is not an ensemble that you're going to find every day. In fact, I don't know of any other work for piano, oboe, and bassoon. I'm sure there are. Don't chime in and tell me there are millions of them. I mean, for all I know, there was a composer who wrote nothing but music for piano, oboe, and bassoon, but it doesn't matter. This is a frothy, tuneful, charming, witty, fun piece of music in 3 movements, and you listen to it and love it. It's a great place to start, because I think Poulenc particularly, because he had a certain insouciance in the way he wrote, a jocular quality to his music. It was funny, and it was witty, and it was eclectic, and it takes all of the pretension out of the music immediately, out of the idea of chamber music. And if you like Poulenc, there's lots more Poulenc. Chamber music particularly, he didn't particularly like strings. He liked woodwind instruments, and he wrote a sextet for piano and wind instruments that's also amazingly fun. So there you go. Get yourself started with the Poulenc trio. You'll be very happy you did. Next, Brahms. Now, Brahms is very ferociously intimidating for some people. His music tends to be extremely carefully and thoroughly written, sometimes to the point where people find it dull, let's be honest. But he was, first and foremost, in the instrumental world, a composer of chamber music. And he wrote magnificent, magnificent chamber music. Nothing more magnificent than his second string sextet. And I include it in this list, first of all, because there aren't so many great string sextets. Boccherini wrote some, and Brahms wrote two, and Dvořák wrote one. And there are a couple others. Martinu, the Czech composer, wrote some. And that's sort of kind of, well, like I said, there aren't many of them. And the ones that were written are generally kind of special. And this second sextet, which is in G major, is absolutely wonderful. And if you look at the list below, you'll see I indicate video. That means I've already talked about it in another video. So you can look it up in the Brahms playlist. And in this particular work, in the How to Listen to Great Music playlist, I take this piece apart movement by movement and play the whole thing for you. So it's a great way to start getting to listen to Brahms, first of all, and Brahms chamber music and chamber music more generally. It is a glorious piece of music. And wherever I have a video about these pieces, I've indicated it in the list below. So you'll have some way to go and hear some of what I've said about these works in greater detail than I talk about them here. Next, Dvořák. Dvořák was, along with Brahms, one of the three or four great chamber music composers in the second half of the 19th century. They were, just so you know, Brahms, Dvořák, Saint-Saëns, the French composer, who was amazing, and Gabriel Fauré, the other French composer who wrote mostly chamber works, which are somewhat elusive but incredibly beautiful once you get into them. Anyway, Dvořák wrote a charming little piece for domestic consumption. This was for performance at home for string trio, that is two violins and a cello. The usual string trio is a violin, a viola, and a cello. But in chamber music, you can mix things up as you please. So it's two violins and a cello and a harmonium. Now, a harmonium is, well, it's a pedal organ. It's a little organ that you have in your living room. And, harmoniums were incredibly popular in the 19th century. Lots of people had them. And what you do is you work on these things called treadles with your feet, and then you could play the thing. It pumped the bellows. And it sounded sort of like an accordion, a little bit, or like a cross between an accordion and an organ. And they were enormously popular in Dvořák's day, in the Romantic era. They were replaced by modern, electric organs, Hammond organs that, remember, Let's Make a Deal. They don't give them away anymore like they used to. Remember, you used to give them away all the time on game shows. A new organ, the Kimball Spinnet organ. One button plays chords, rhythms, and melody notes. Remember that stuff? You could program them a million different ways, and you could play all this stuff at home on your home organ. I met one person who actually owned one. I never met anyone else. They lived in New Hampshire. When I was on a trip with my glee club, they actually had one of those suckers in their living room. And it must have been the very end of the home organ world, because it used to be a big, big business. Anyway, Dvořák's Bagatelles, a bagatelle means just a short little gem, little thing, was written for, that ancient sort of milieu, when people made music at home. There goes the cat. And they are gorgeous. Oh, they're so gorgeous. They're so beautiful. They're so fabulously, melodically succulent and wonderful. And you'll just listen to them and be humming them for the rest of your life. And you just have to listen to them. They're so pretty. And the piece is actually in what they call cyclical form. That is, the opening theme comes back periodically. So they belong as a group. There's a little group of them, I think 5 of them or so. And the piece doesn't last very long, but wow. An incredible piece. And I made a video about this work, so you can hear some of it. It's exceptional, gorgeous, beautiful. Next, George Crumb. Now, what's this George Crumb doing here? George Crumb was an avant-garde 20th century composer who did all kinds of crazy things with instruments, and his style is basically what we call atonal, often, not always. It was very eclectic. Sometimes it was purely tonal and beautiful, and he borrowed themes from all kinds of people and things and places. But he wrote a piece called Black Angels for electric string quartet. And this is not a comfortable piece. It's called Images from the Dark Land and all this stuff in it. The string quartet doesn't just play 2 violins, viola, and a cello. They also have to play percussion instruments, and they have to shout and talk and scream, and all kinds of stuff happens. It's in a bunch of really short little movements, and it begins with a piece called The Night of the Electric Insects. Each movement has title. There's stick and bone music, and there's, it's just amazing. There's God music. They play glasses filled with water, like, you used to do at your friend's wedding, when you did this and swirled, your wine goblet and made it hum. Well, there's some of that in there. It's an amazing piece of music, an extraordinary piece of music. Not easy listening, but valuable listening, fun listening, actually captivating listening. And you just sit back. It's only 20 some odd minutes long, and let it rip over you. And the reason I included that is because I had friends who are completely not into classical music at all, and they were not. And I popped on The Night of the Electric Insects, and I listened to it, and it's nuts. It's with the violins going crazy, and they're amplified, so it's scary, scary, scary horror movie music. It really is. And I said, that is The Night of the Electric Insects. And my friend Frank's face lit up, and he said, yes, it is. That's exactly what it sounds like. If you're ever curious what an electric insect sounds like, this is your piece. But he became hooked on George Crumb after that. Everything he wrote, he met George Crumb. He was very happy. He was like a total Crumb aficionado. And George Crumb passed away about 2 years ago. An amazing, amazing composer, a delightful and warm and funny and humane human being. One of the great 20th century experimental avant-gardist composers who had a totally personal style. This is one of his masterpieces, and I'm not making any sort of presuppositions about what work is going to really turn you on. And to give you some sense of I just want to give you a wide range of experience of the widest range of happenings in the chamber music field. And this is definitely one of them. So with that proviso, just turn yourself loose on it and give it a listen. You'll find it fascinating. I guarantee it. It's an amazing piece. Then we have Mendelssohn's Octet. Well, Mendelssohn's Octet is one of the most popular pieces of chamber music in the world. I mean, it's amazing. He was only 16 when he wrote it. It is a screaming masterpiece in a form which was really new for that point, the octet for strings. And it is a genuine octet for strings. I mean, some of his contemporaries, one of them, Ludwig Spohr, who was very popular in his day, wrote double quartets, where you have 2 string quartets going at it. But this is a genuine octet. It's for every possible combination of 8 strings, 2 violins, 2 violas, 4 violins, 2 violas, and 2 cellos, pardon me. That's the octet. It's beautiful. It's so much fun to listen to. It is an exercise in chamber music texture. You listen to it and listen to all the combinations he gets out of all the different ways that he can make his stringed instruments sing these luscious tunes that he has. It's just a great piece and a unique piece. And uniqueness is sort of the name of the game as far as this group of works goes. So the Mendelssohn Octet is definitely something you should get your hands on and give a listen to. It's wonderful. And if you like it, he wrote 6 amazing string quartets. He wrote 2 fabulous string quintets. You're really going to be in very good shape for exploring chamber music for string instruments. It's that simple. It's a wonderful opening piece. And it also is a good one because it exists somewhere between real chamber music, that is, one thing to a part, austerity, and orchestral music, where you have lots of instruments and they all play the same things. And so, it's somewhere in the middle. And so if you like orchestral music, or if you like pieces for string ensembles, string orchestras, you go here, and then you can slim down a little bit more with other music for solo strings. It's a great work, just a great work, a youthful piece of genius. Next, we're going to do a real string quartet. An actual string quartet, but this one is a string quartet like none other you've heard, just like the George Crumb was amazing. Janáček, the Czech composer, Leoš Janáček was his name. His string quartet number 2, it has a subtitle, Intimate Letters. He wrote 2 string quartets. They both have subtitles. One of them is based on the Kreutzer Sonata, the Tolstoy story about, domestic abuse, basically. And this one, Intimate Letters, is about Janáček's love affair. He was in his 70s with a woman 30 or 40 years younger than he was. Her name was Kamila Stoslova, or something like that. And he wrote her hundreds and hundreds of love letters, and she was married and had kids, and she was kind of embarrassed by the whole thing. And her husband took it very well. They just realized they had this crazy old compositional genius chasing around after them, and they left it at that. Their relationship was not consummated, as far as we know. But he wrote incredibly passionate letters, and this string quartet embodies those texts, and they run the gamut from, well, it is such a high voltage piece. I mean, it's just sweating passion all the way through from beginning to end. It's amazing, but sometimes it's relaxed and funny and dance-like. Sometimes it's just screaming, and it doesn't sound like you think a string quartet sounds like. When you listen to, see movies and they have string quartets and they're all going, they're just all very cultured and tame and civilized. You see, but this is not that. This is hot, heavy, crazy, hairy, passionately intense music from, like I said, from the very first note. And he makes noises with this string quartet that you have never heard before. There are tremolos on the bridge of the instrument that sound really, it sounds really scary. And there are harmonics, high pitched tones. I mean, the violin writing is way, way, way up in the stratosphere. It's an astonishing piece of music and so much fun to listen to. The end of it is like nothing you've ever heard in your life. It's great. So give that a shot and see what you think. And next, what is this thing here? Oh, yeah, I did a video about that one too, by the way. So that's a good thing. Then we have one of the greatest works for string orchestra. This is one that has all the snobs having, panting and heaving over it, but you don't have to join them. Schubert's string quintet in C major. Deutsch is the catalog number, 956. And I made a video about it, so you can go and have a look. An extraordinarily beautiful piece, spiritual piece in the second movement anyway, particularly. This is a work for 2 violins, viola, and 2 cellos. Most string quintets have 2 violins, 2 violas, and 1 cello. For example, Mozart's do that. Schubert's is different. That gives it a richness on the bottom end because of the 2 cellos, which is really amazing because the cellos can sing as duet partners, as they do in the first movement. The second theme, yeah, da 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 da. It's 2 cellos. It's amazing. The scherzo, the third movement, is a hunting piece. If you think strings can't sound like hunting horns, think again and listen to that sucker. It's one of the all-time great transcendental pieces in the chamber music repertoire. So great that it has a mystique, a mythos about it, which is astonishing. But there's no reason why it can't just immediately appeal to beginners. I mean, it's one of the first string chamber works I heard, and I just fell in love with it. It is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And there's nothing else like it in the repertoire. Again, that's the point of these selections, things that just don't sound like anything else, even though they're chamber works. And if you get into the Schubert, then you're really going to be, into the thick of the chamber music universe, because this piece has a centrality to it. It's one of the iconic pieces of string chamber music. But again, it's very, very special and incredibly beautiful. So after Schubert, well, Martinů. I mentioned Martinů because he wrote sextets. He wrote a couple of them, actually, like Dvořák and Brahms and those people who wrote sextets. But this piece comes from the end of his life, 1950, I think 59. Yeah, 1959. He wrote a nonet. A nonet is a piece for 9. It means 9 of something. And this is a mixed ensemble. It's for a group of strings and a group of woodwinds and a horn. I think, there's a horn in there. And it's just a delightful piece. Oh, it's so pretty. And so much fun to listen to hear these 9 people chuggling and chortling along. Martinů is a fabulous composer. He's just now really coming into his own as a great composer, as somebody who people acknowledge as having the chops, to be considered one of the greats. His music is very tuneful. It's often based on Czech folk music, but he was also a neoclassicist and he was interested in jazz. And, his style was entirely personal, entirely his own. A lot of it is extremely dreamy. It's hallucinatory. It seems to It seems to space out in places just when it's going normally. And that comes from his use of what we call non-functional harmony. That is, he hits chords. His music comes to rest in places where you don't expect it. It's very tonal and very charming to listen to, but also unexpected. And that gives the music an incredibly fresh quality, along with his constant use of rhythmic syncopation. It's fantastic. Fantastic. There's a part of his slow movement, and the slow movement of this piece, the central slow movement, that is so beautiful. It has an innocence and sensitivity. It's da 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 ya dum ba da ya da da da. The flutes come in ya da 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 with the strings underneath plucking their instruments, plunk 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 like this. You can't describe it. I certainly can't sing it. But wow, what a beautiful, beautiful work. Something well worth getting to know. And then at the other end of the spectrum of the all sweetness and light, there is Bartók, his Sonata for 2 pianos and percussion, which actually ends in sweetness and light, but begins in spookiness and creepiness and barbarity, and has a central slow movement full of nocturnal sounds, night sounds, bird sounds, and insect sounds, and it's written for 2 pianos and percussion. And the percussionists play a set of timpani and a bass drum and a gong and a xylophone and a triangle and a bunch of drums of various types, snare drums with and without snares. It's one of the great chamber works of the 20th century. It's for an ensemble that nobody ever duplicated to the extent that Bartók did. George Crumb wrote a piece for 2 pianos and percussion called Music for a Summer Evening. It's Macrocosmos 2, I think, or something like that. But it's really called Music for a Summer Evening, which if you like the Bartók, there's something by George Crumb you should hear as well. It's absolutely extraordinary. But Bartók's Sonata for 2 pianos and percussion has so much going for it as a totally unique listening experience. If you like pulse-pounding music, here's a chamber work. I mean, a real chamber work that is as pulse-pounding as anything anybody ever wrote. I mean, it'll really, really get your heart beating. It's exciting as hell. And emotionally, it's extremely gripping. His music was used for Stanley Kubrick's film, The Shining, his music for strings, percussion, and celesta. And for the same reason that some of this is, it has that spooky nocturnal atmosphere quite often that you find in the slow movement of this work. And so if you like this piece, you will definitely like the music for strings, percussion, and celesta, which is basically an orchestral work. But this piece shows you that chamber music yields nothing to the orchestra in terms of excitement and rhythmic energy and sheer raw power and physicality. An incredible piece of music. And last but not least, we're going way back to one of the all-time great chamber music pieces in the universe. Now, this is Mozart. Mozart wrote amazing chamber music. He wrote string quartets, he wrote string quintets, which he kind of put on the map, and he wrote wonderful pieces for wind ensembles. But this is one of his most amazing pieces. It's his Divertimento. A divertimento just means, it's what it sounds like, a diversion, something light. Although this is, and many movements with dance things put into it. Divertimento in E-flat major for string trio. Kerschel, which is the catalog number 563. And I made a video about this one too. So you can have a look, as I did the Bartók, by the way, and the Schubert and all these other things. So like I said, you can go and look at those videos separately. Mozart's Divertimento is unbelievable. It's only 3 strings. It's violin, viola, and cello. And if you think because there's only 3 little string instruments, this piece sounds like it's missing something, think again. It's unbelievably rich and full of color, and the tunes are just to die for. It has 6 movements. I think last time I checked, and lasts nearly an hour. It's an amazing piece. You don't have to listen to all of it at once. It's a divertimento. Take it as you feel like it. If it diverts, then good. If it stops diverting, come back to it later. But wow, what a piece of music this is. Anyone who's heard it has just sat back with their jaw going like, ugh. Because Mozart was one of those geniuses who was such a genius that it seems like sometimes you could get a little bored with things that weren't challenging. But to write the largest piece of music ever written for 3 string instruments, basically, I mean, the largest in the classical forms. And it's a challenge he couldn't resist and he could not fail to succeed at. I mean, the last movement is got a tune that will, oh my God, it's it's like a folk song. Da 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 dum, ya da 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 da. That's when the second subject sort of sounds like "Roll Out the Barrel" or something. I mean, it's popular music in the sense that the tunes are as catchy as anyone could possibly make them. But the entire work, just 3 instruments, and it's so sophisticatedly put together. You don't hear the sophistication. You don't. You hear it because it's not boring. You hear it because you're going to fall in love with it. That's what great music does. That's what great art does. And that's what chamber music does when you get to know it, of course. But in order to get to know it, you have to listen and you have to take your time. And so I hope this list of really individual masterpieces will give you some sense of the unbelievable range and color that's waiting for you as you explore instrumental music without words written for small groups. It's an infinite repertoire of stuff once you get started. It really is. And these pieces are all, I think, wonderful pieces to sink your teeth into as you're just getting started. And let me know how you think about them. Try some. Tell me what you think, please. We'll chat them up a little bit. And if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I always do my best. I read all the comments and will do my best to answer whatever I can. So thank you so much for joining me, friends. Keep on listening. Take care.